Burrow airs it out. Chase. Hello. Touchdown.
And I got a voice inside that needs to be fed.
Are two of the best historically, just not thus far. Against these receivers.
Making adjustments again, and there is Smith roaming free, breaks a tackle. Ohio State strikes quickly.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jordan with Ohio Sports Talk. We are coming at you live tonight with a very special guest, staff writer by the Dogs by Nature, Barry. How are you doing this evening, man?
I am doing well. I saw where the Steelers are going to go all out and they signed Aaron Rodgers today. What's your opinion of that? That was crazy.
I think that's I think that's temporary. I think Will Howard's eventually going to take the lead in the reins of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it's always been rumored. They've kind of stood by their guns, both parties. We knew Aaron Rodgers was going to wait, till last minute. It's kind of what he's been doing lately, even with his first signing with the New York Jets. So it's not really uncharacteristic for him to take this much time out and come up with something. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, he's going to be a day one starter. You don't sign Aaron Rodgers to ride the bench, but I don't see a full season under Aaron Rodgers and it being successful. Mike Tomlin, we all know last year that Fields went 4-2 and then got benched for Russell Wilson, so it didn't matter that the wins were in the win column. Yeah. So we'll see. Mike Tomlin is his own man, so we'll see how long he goes with Aaron Rodgers, what he deals with the shenanigans, and if Aaron Rodgers' body can even handle the AFC North, because although the Bengals defense was poor, they have top 12 to top 10 defenses in the rest of the division. So guys like Myles Garrett and company are feasting at the mouth to really get after him. The whole Ravens defense is probably ready. And once the Bengals get out of their own way with contracts, I'm sure some of the Bengals pass rushers are more than happy to see, Aaron Rodgers on the field. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are regressing with this move.
Well, one thing for sure about Rodgers is he's an outdoor northern cold weather guy. So for him to go in the AFC North is not going to change anything for him. Every state in the AFC North is outdoors and, has its degrees of cold weather. So playing for the Jets, playing for the Packers, he's used to all that.
And, I don't think it's necessarily the outdoors, but the AFC, and he even kind of found it out playing a season with the Jets last year. The AFC is a completely different animal than the NFC. The NFC is more West Coast, more flashy. You don't see top tier defensive linemen on the interior, minus Detroit and the things they've done the last couple of seasons, building that defensive line. And a few years under Minnesota when Mike Zimmer first got there, he kind of took that defense to the next level. But that's not typically what you see on the West Coast, especially in the NFC versus, AFC. It's top tier defensive guys night in and night out, both for the AFC North and a little bit. You look at the AFC South and, the things that the Texans are doing there. The Colts are rebuilding. They just kind of had a defensive renaissance when it came to the draft. So, these are games he's going to play night in and night out, and not just a couple flashes and a pans there and a couple, harder games, when it came to his time against Seattle back when they had the Legion of Boom. So it's a little bit reminiscent in his age. He didn't particularly play well last year. Even though the Jets were a top 10 defense, he couldn't elevate that offense to take those next levels. So I think it's going to be a little bit more of the same in Pittsburgh, and it's even going to be harder, and the window is going to be shorter because this isn't a Jets management that kind of rolls with the punches just to be on the front page news. This is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Mike Tomlin wins. He wins in a regular season. He's never had a losing regular season since he's been there. Mm-hmm. And I think the minute it goes south, he's going to pull the plug. So I give it to about week 5 before you see Will Howard or Mason Rudolph take snaps as a starter. But, it's any given Sunday for a reason, Barry, and that's just kind of we'll see how it all pans out.
Yeah, I think Rudolph thought he was going to be the starter this year. I cover the Senior Bowl every year, and all the head coaches are there except for the ones that are in the Super Bowl. So I've met Tomlin several times. He is exactly what you see. He's that exact same personality. He's, hey, how are you? You know, and able to talk to him, and he doesn't brush you off or anything like a Bill Belichick. But he's exactly that way. Great guy. As long as you go in, say what you got to say, get out, move on. He doesn't have to remember you, but he's a great guy off the field. I'm sure he's a great coach as long as he's been coaching.
Oh, and I agree with you there, Barry. But outside of Pittsburgh, we kind of touched on them. But you're primarily in the Cleveland area, so that here we are, Barry. Cleveland coming off a 3-14 season. Far removed from the playoff seasons that they had prior, and the quarterback situation is kind of the Wild West. Where do you want to start, Barry, with this Cleveland Browns team? How do you feel about the quarterback competition? Give me a little insight on your expectations, offensive line, and especially with the revamped backfield.
Yeah, well, we'll just start off with quarterback because realistically, Coach, that's what everybody's going to look at this year. The fact that we drafted the nation's leading receiving yards and receptions leader and a tight end, which never happens. We drafted Harold Fannin out of Ohio, out of Bowling Green. Nobody's going to talk about that. They're not going to talk about how we got 2 running backs this year. What everybody wants to know is about the quarterback room, specifically Shedeur Sanders. And we know that. We know that they should be on TV. They should be on primetime, have Sunday night games and Thursday night games. They don't. They don't have any primetime games at all. The only exception to that is they got 2 Sunday afternoon games, and they've got 1 international game in London. Other than that, the NFL is not real hip on the Browns, and I don't blame them. They've got lots of problems. They thought that they were going to be a good team on paper before the season started last year. Then right out of the gate, they got whooped by the Dallas Cowboys. And how many games did the Dallas Cowboys win last year? 6, 7, 8. It was horrible. So they got killed by a team that we thought was a 12-4 team, and they got their ass handed to them. But Shedeur Sanders is what's going to drive interest. I see stories all the time. I mean, they've only had OTAs, and already people are saying, Shedeur Sanders this, Shedeur Sanders is going to be cut. Shedeur Sanders is going to be starter in week 1 or starter by week 5. Dude, they haven't even gone to training camp yet. I mean, we're not talking about July and half of August. We're talking about the 1st of June when everybody is still planning their vacations before they have to end up in training camp. And people are already talking about Sanders like either he's the Messiah or he's going to be the odd man out. Now, you take the other guy that they drafted, Dylan Gabriel. He was at the Senior Bowl. And I got to meet him and interview him. He's only 5'11", maybe. He throws a great ball. When it came out of the Senior Bowl, I made a note in a daily diary that the one player, and we're talking about Jackson Dart being there, we're talking about Jalen Milroe being there. I said the one player that looks like he could start week 1 is Dylan Gabriel. And he's not 6'4", he's not 6'3". He throws a great ball. He's very accurate. And of course, when you're dealing with something like an all-star game and in practices, a lot of times it's 7-on-7s. A lot of times it's 1-on-1 with a DB and a receiver. So, there's not much of a pass rush. So it's hard to tell. But one thing about Dylan Gabriel, he was drafted in the 3rd round. That was head coach Kevin Stefanski's choice. Out of all the quarterbacks that were going to be not taken in the 1st round, that was his choice to draft and to groom and to develop. It wasn't Shedeur Sanders. It wasn't Will Howard. It wasn't Quentin Ewers from Texas. It was Dylan Gabriel. Now Sanders, why he dropped, how he dropped. It kind of reminded me when Aaron Rodgers was drafted and they showed him. Remember they showed him in the green room, Coach?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember they kept showing him, and finally, like in the 20s, the Packers picked him, and when they picked him, they went, "Oh my gosh, they got Brett Favre. Why do they need Aaron Rodgers?" But Sanders didn't drop 20 picks; he dropped 4 or 5 rounds. And not only did he drop all those rounds, every single team in the NFL passed on him 5 times. And some passed on him 6 times. What's your thoughts?
A lot of what I saw and what my producer also saw, his interviews weren't great. His pre-draft interviews were kind of scolded a little bit, and I think that that plays a big role. And his last name is Sanders. There was a lot of Cleveland media and a lot of Cleveland folks that we interact with that said, even way before the draft, when Colorado was still playing football and college football was going prime time, that they didn't want the circus. And in this day and age where player personnel and the things that come with it. You look at the Raiders, for instance, and all the issues that they've had with their off-field talent. Just kind of comes to mind. And even Cincinnati during the mid years with Marvin Lewis, when we had it felt like every defensive guy was in jail every other weekend. So
Ocho Cinco.
Ocho didn't have off the field issues until he got to Miami, but he was kind of he was a locker room distraction to a degree. But I'm talking like Odell Thurman getting arrested, and some of the guys we got from the NFC, like we brought in guys like Tank Johnson that had issues, and safety Roy Williams from Dallas. Mike Zimmer brought a lot of those guys over that Adam Pac-Man Jones, with his own issues.
Joe Mixon.
We drafted. Mixon was a talent that fell to us because of that incident. Had that incident not happened, he would have been drafted much sooner, I believe. But he's long kind of put that in the back pocket. But I really do think that everything that was involved with Sanders, it wasn't talent wise, it was his attitude. Everything that came with it, his posse, if you will. And just kind of the media surrounding him was never really positive, even in Colorado. And everything was kind of, they were like, oh, the band's got to play a specific song. And, we're going to retire a guy that, barely went. We're going to retire a guy's number that barely went over 500 as a record. And, really didn't compete in their conference play at all. So I just think there was that was a big factor. So, if I am an NFL GM in this day and age where, information's literally in the palm of your hand, I would pass on him too, because it's just quarterback is such a big investment right now, and it makes or breaks GMs. It makes or breaks, front offices, head coaches. And Shedeur Sanders just didn't. He had that it factor when it comes to talent, but he doesn't have that it factor when it comes to everything else. Now he sounds like he's learned something right now with the media. I've never heard a bad interview with him yet post draft, but everything going into it was just a big red flag. And I feel like the NFL treated it like a bad and toxic relationship. Like, no, we've seen this enough in this league. We have our own issues, and GMs weren't willing to make that leap yet.
Yeah, and he's got decent college numbers. It's not like he had bad numbers and that his father just kind of pumped him up. 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. His last year, 27 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So it's not like he's a turnover machine. He had 74% completion percentage. Well, we know anything over 65% is gold. So for him to have that the ability to complete that many passes, threw for 4,134 yards. That's not a bad season. He had a horrible offensive line. He had no running game. The few games that I saw in Colorado, he was running for his life. He was being flushed a lot. He wasn't being flushed and was trying to run to gain yardage. He was flushed and still looking downfield is the kind of player he is. Well, that's exactly what Kevin Stefanski likes. Deshaun Watson was out of place with Kevin Stefanski because Kevin Stefanski doesn't want a player like Lamar Jackson or Steve Young or John Elway that's going to gain a lot of yardage, or Michael Vick that's going to gain a lot of yardage by running and using his legs a lot. He likes a pocket passer. He's always liked a pocket passer. He had Case Keenum when he was with the Vikings, win 11 games and go to the playoffs. He was a pocket passer. So Shedeur is a pocket passer. So is Dylan Gabriel. So is Joe Flacco. So is Kenny Pickett. So all these guys fit the mold that Stefanski wants. And I just think it's going to be everybody, every sports site, Yahoo, ESPN, everybody, CBS Sports, is going to cover the Browns at least through training camp. Now, once the season starts, they'll back off unless Shedeur is playing. But they like that anticipation of what's he going to do next. Well, what shirts does he wear? What's he going to do here? Who is he beat now? Where is he on the depth chart? Right now, he's penciled in at number 4. The pecking order on that is they signed Joe Flacco to be the starter. He's got experience. He's been with the team before. He already knows the offense. Then they traded for Kenny Pickett to be the backup. He's got 25 NFL starts, so at least he's got experience. Then Stefanski chose Dylan Gabriel to be his young developmental player. Now, why they took Shedeur, I don't know. When they picked him, everybody else went, what? But it wouldn't surprise me a bit if somebody's quarterback got hurt during training camp, which every year somebody's starter goes down. And if they're not satisfied with the backup, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if somebody like Shedeur Sanders gets traded. And that may be why they chose him, because he was just too good to be true in the 5th round.
And I agree with that, but I don't think you draft him for trading. I think a guy like Kenny Pickett definitely comes to mind, especially when you look at the New Orleans Saints situation right now. And, Derek Carr stepping down, choosing to go into retirement after an injury that just wasn't getting any healthier. But like you said, there's other guys that are going to be banged up, bruised. We'll definitely kind of see that go into play. But I think Shedeur Sanders is a lock. I think Joe Flacco, this being his 2nd time with the organization, is a lock. And in my opinion, Gabriel is somebody that you definitely want to keep, because you well put it, that was an organizational pick before they realized that Sanders was going to continue to fall 2 more rounds. And we all know that the Browns also had caught wind that the Philadelphia Eagles were going to take Sanders had he been there. The pick right after the Cleveland. So you just look at all those deciding factors that went into that. And, I speak to my producer and co-host Doug all the time about it, that for once, I love it. I love the fact that you got a guy that's won a Super Bowl in Joe Flacco. You got a guy that has a Super Bowl ring by default, but still in a Super Bowl system with Kenny Pickett. Then you got 2 rookies just battling it out right now. And this is the most competitive quarterback room when it comes to camp that I can ever remember being a sports fan. You've always had your guy that you drafted and maybe a veteran that is either going to surpass him in year 1 and make the rookie hold a clipboard. I'm a Bengals fan, so I think about Carson Palmer held a clipboard for John Kitna in year 1 when they went 8-8 before Palmer took under the reins and had another 8-8 season after that. Yeah. And, but besides the drama and some of the injuries, it worked out. So, and maybe that's going to be the route for Cleveland here, that, hey, we got these guys, we got some talent here, let's keep an established veteran. I think that's its own battle, is between, Flacco and Pickett. And then the way I see it is the second battle is between the two rookies on who's going to be, who's going to wear that earpiece and really, hear everything and be involved on the sidelines and have to be ready to go in a moment's notice. Because if it is Flacco, he is a little bit injury prone. He's older, a guy that's not going to be able to really move around in a pocket if it collapses. So Shador may get that call, so we'll see how it goes. But I think Kenny Pickett's the outside man looking in when you said, if there's a trading piece or there's a bargain, it's Kenny Pickett in my mind. He showed that he can play some with Philadelphia. We know the famous highlight of him not releasing the ball and going down to the ground with it is going to follow him forever. That's when the internet stays undefeated for a reason. But I just I think he's outside looking in. I think Shador Sanders starts, depending if Flacco comes out and gets you guys, 4-2 in the first 6 games or 6-2 in the first 8 games, and you have a prime chance to, succeed and move on. I think he just holds a clipboard, and I maybe do a couple end zone packages. The Browns when healthy, the Browns have an above average offensive line. So, Sanders has never really been protected before, like you so well put it, in his days in Colorado. So maybe you can start implementing a little bit of like some short yardage plays, some red zone plays, stuff of that nature when, Flacco's legs aren't going to be a factor. You bring in a guy like Shador Sanders now the defense has to think, is he going to pop pass or is he going to, tuck it and run, especially with the revamped backfield, which we'll touch on here in a minute. But, I love the competition. I honestly don't know who starts week 1 because I just, outside looking in, this is a front office I don't really trust ever since the Deshaun Watson trade of the century. That, a trade hasn't gone that bad since Mike Ditka, moved up for Ricky Williams in my memory of, going over league NFL blunders. So I don't know who's going to start week 1, but in my mind, it's got to be Joe Flacco, right?
Yeah, the Browns traded Paul Warfield to the Miami Dolphins, and he ended up in the Hall of Fame because of it. So there are bad trades that happen all the time. Oddly enough, Cleveland's got 5 quarterbacks on the roster right now. They still haven't put Deshaun Watson on any kind of list. So he's actually an active member. It's expected that he'll go on some sort of PUP list or IR list, at the end of training camp or something. And I agree with you. I think it's going to be a 2-man battle for the rookies to who's going to be that QB3. But here's another thing. The Browns only keep 3 quarterbacks. If they've got 4 guys, that means one has to go somewhere. I think if they put either Shador or Dylan Gabriel on, if they cut them and put them on waivers, either one of them would be claimed, so they'd be gone. I don't know if you want to risk putting your starter, Joe Flacco, on waivers and cut him with the idea to bring him back. But if they could claim one of these guys again, put him on practice squad, they got 4 protected spots. You could protect your 4th quarterback that way, and the others would be on the active roster. But everybody's going to cover the Browns in training camp. You're going to see stories all the time about what's happening between Shador, either in camp as far as on the depth chart or in competition with Dylan Gabriel, like you said. And who knows? I know Shador's got younger legs, so does Dylan Gabriel. Joe Flacco, he played 6 games for the Browns, but last year with the Colts, he only played 5. And before that, when we got him, he wasn't even the starter with the Jets. He hadn't started a full season since 2017. He's played 3 games here, 6 games here, 4 games here. So I think when he was with the Denver Broncos in 2017, he played most of the season. So the Browns are the only ones that really has said, we want you to be our starting quarterback, and here's the reins. Go for it. So we'll just see how that plays out.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I think it's a little crazy. Everybody's been keeping stats on completions and incompletions, stuff of that nature here in OTAs, but that's the world we and we'll really see where it goes. But I want to dive a little bit, post Nick Chubb era. You have Ford there. Who becomes running back 1 for Cleveland in your mind?
I think when a training camp breaks, I think it's going to be Jerome Ford. He's the veteran there. He just took a pay cut to stay with the Browns. That really shocked me. I really thought that they were going to try to move Jerome Ford to somebody. He's a great kickoff guy. He actually is. As a running back, he's just a roller coaster. He doesn't have many yards after contact, which is what you got to have as a running back. You got to have somebody that's going to take hits and bounce off of hits and gain an extra 2, 3, 5 yards. He's not that guy. On third down, don't give it to Jerome Ford. Nick Chubb, you give it to him all day long. I was actually shocked that they didn't re-sign Nick Chubb. I thought that they would give him one more shot, let him have his Saquon Barkley, Renaissance season, light up the league, come in third in rushing. That's what I thought was going to happen with Nick Chubb. None of that ever happened. When they drafted Quinshon Judkins, I think eventually that's going to be your starting quarterback. Now, I love this guy from Tennessee, Dylan Stampson. I do a mock draft every year. I had us drafting him early in the third round, so I already knew quite a bit about him. SEC Offensive Player of the Year, just has an absolute different gear once he gets past the first defensive level. 1,491 yards, 22 touchdowns last year. He is just an explosive kid. Got real good speed. I'm really impressed with him. Even though I think he'll be the change of pace back. I think he'll be the third down back because he doesn't have the size that Nick Chubb had, or he doesn't have the size that Judkins has. He's 5'8", 200 pounds, so he's not that beefy. Gonna push the line and drag players. He's got an exceptional burst through the hole with a rare, like I said, a second gear acceleration, and he can turn moderate creases into chunk plays. He was actually clocked at 23 miles an hour in one SEC game. He comes from a tough conference. Judkins comes from a tough conference. So both of these kids have got, their own set of skill set. Judkins is 6 foot, 221 pounds. Well, 20 pounds is a lot to have on a running back. As far as that, he is about the same type of runner as Nick Chubb. He's got, I think he's got devastating stiff arm and exceptional vision. I fully expect him that by week, say 4, 5, 6, that Judkins is going to start getting more snaps than Jerome Ford. And eventually Ford's, I think, is going to be running back number 3. They put Sampson in there. Be interested to see if they could put them both in the backfield at the same time. But when the Browns had Kareem Hunt, they rarely did that. And the Browns have had a lot of running backs over their time. When they had Jim Brown, they had, a good complement to him. And when they had other players like Ernest Biner, they had Kevin Mack. So they've always had 2 running backs in the backfield at the same time. I'd like to see them play some same dual running back situations, but realistically, the league's kind of just gotten away from that.
Well, I don't think you can be successful with just one cowbell running back. The NFL has kind of shown that through the years that each team has got to have a 1-2 punch combination. And the Giants in my memory under the Eli Manning back when they were winning Super Bowls, they were a nice framework for that. And
Brandon Jacobs.
Brandon Jacobs, Barber,
Barber,
Jacobs, all those guys. They had the thunder, the lightning, everything you can imagine for the backfield. And I think a guy like Judkins, who showed that at Ohio State, splitting carries and often being on the same field as Travion Henderson, has got to be something you got to keep in the back of your mind that this young man can come out and shine with people or be a cowbell by himself, like he was in SEC before he transferred over to Ohio State. So I think you got kind of an everything back in Judkins, being able to watch them both in SEC and, win a national championship in a 2-back system at Ohio State. So, make no mistake about it. I really do think that, that's a future plan. If you look at Stefanski and how he's kind of laying everything out, draft wise, you got a very versatile tight end, FBS, not always Division I guys night in and night out, but you got one of the better tight ends in college. So you're resetting that up. You know what you have in running back with Judkins. You're setting that up. Kind of break to me. How do you feel about the offensive line this year? Because last year, it kind of re-ranked. I know the injury bug was a huge factor. I'm not ignoring that as a Cincinnati fan myself. I totally understand offensive line woes, but how do you feel this year with some guys getting some health back and even the draft offensive line wise?
Yeah, let me get one more point off of running back before we go to offensive line. If you were drafting, you were the GM of the Browns, and it came up, would you have taken Henderson over Judkins?
Personally, I would have taken Henderson over Judkins because I always had Henderson as a better pass protector when it comes to playing out of the shotgun and playing not as a guy that is going to be running it per se, but pass protection is key in this league when you're running back. And I always had Henderson with a little bit more IQ when it comes to that, because it not only, that guy, he played all 4 years in college. So in a lot of pass protection schemes, a lot of different quarterbacks, both mobile and non-mobile that he worked with. And I just always had him graded just a little bit higher than Judkins. That was my only concern. I think also Henderson is a little bit smoother in the screen game. You saw that prime time against Texas. So he can hit a home run from anywhere if you get the ball into his hands. So it was splitting hairs for me. But Henderson does come with an injury, bug. More miles from college on him. He played all 4 years, where Judkins only played 3. So Judkins has more tread on the tires coming out. So and he's a little bit less injury prone, where Henderson had a the soft tissue issue in his foot his sophomore year, and a little bit of injuries here and there coming out of Ohio State. So, I mean, if you're a GM, I see why the Browns went younger and the Browns went more explosive when it came to a true running back, where Henderson's kind of a guy that can, catch it, block for you, kind of all over the field guy, where you kind of already have a little bit of that in Jerome Ford, and then you guys, made the second pick. But I would have picked Henderson over him. Just based off experience and college play and college experience alone, but I don't think you guys lost that draw by any chance.
Yeah, he's a workout freak, and Judkins is. He's an absolute workout freak. Getting to the offensive line, it was just 2 years ago that the Browns' offensive line was ranked number 3 in the league.
Yes.
Now they've got, out of the starting 5 from 2 years ago, they've got 4 that are still playing, that are still starting. The only player that's not in that group, it was the former first-round pick, Jed Wills from Alabama. And I wrote an article about is the Browns' offensive line a problem area? Because here's what we got. We got Jack Conklin, who's got 1 year left on his contract. When Conklin plays, he's one of the best in the league. But the dude just gets hurt all the time. And when he comes back, he gets hurt. He has missed almost as many games as he has played since he signed a free agent contract with the Browns in 2020. That is my only knock on him. If he can play and stay healthy, I got absolutely no problem. Now, on the other side, on the left side, there's an opening. Who we got penciled in is DeJuan Jones, which, played for Ohio State. He was at the Senior Bowl the year that he was a rookie. He showed up on Tuesday, and the next day he was gone. So I had scheduled to interview him on Wednesday, and he was gone. He was like 6'8", 374 when he was at the Senior Bowl. I think and they never give a reason for why he left. I think the Senior Bowl just didn't want to feed him. That's what I'm thinking. But he's a huge, human being. What his success is that he's got such long arms. What he does on pass rushers is he just sticks that arm out and just keeps feeding his defender back past the pocket. That's his main pass rushing skill. Great run blocker. You got no problem. If you got somebody that big, you're going to move bodies out of the way. But the problem with DeJuan Jones, he will be entering his third year this year. He's been hurt 2 years, 2 times, 2 years, been on IR twice. So he's injury prone. So both tackle situations are an issue. Who they have as a backup is they signed in free agency this year, Cornelius Lucas. He last played for the Washington Commanders. He was there for 5 years. He's played in 129 NFL games with 54 starts. So he's got, he's got good experience, but he's 34 years old. He's on the wrong side of 30. Then another guy they signed in free agency this year is Taven Jenkins, the offensive guard from the Chicago Bears.
I like that signing.
Yeah, he's like 6'6", 321, good player. He's got 38 starts, played in 45 games. The last 3 years, he's played a lot for the Bears. His rookie year, he only played in 6 games. That is a great quality depth, but he's more, I'm not saying he hasn't played tackle, he has, but he is more penciled in at offensive guard. Now, the center, Ethan Posick, I don't know why he hasn't been named a Pro Bowler yet. Tall kid, 6'6", 6'7". Usually your offensive centers are like 6'2", 6'3". They're usually smaller than the smallest one on the line. Solid, all business. The center before him was J.C. Treader, team clown, always making jokes. Ethan Posick is business only. Business in practice, business in games, not going to screw around. And then the offensive guards is the crown jewel of the Browns offensive line. Wyatt Teller's been to 3 Pro Bowls. Joe Bitonio, 7 straight Pro Bowls. Been named first team All-Pro twice, second team All-Pro 3 times. He thought about retiring after last year. And I think what happens in a situation like that is I interviewed Joe Thomas before his induction ceremony. He went through a 1-15 season, then he went to an 0-16 season. And that's the season he got hurt in game 7. He had all those consecutive snaps. But I asked him, I said, did that 0-16 season break you? And he said, what broke me was the season before. And I said, why? He said, well, you prepare every game to win. You eat a certain way. You don't eat this. You don't eat that. You have to eat this instead. You work out. You run. You lift weights. All of this is in preparation. You go by the game plan. You study for your opponent, and then you lose 15 games. He said, that absolutely broke me. He said, I had not thought about retiring or leaving or anything until that 1-15 season. And I think that's what happened with Joe Bitonio. In 2023, the Browns won 11 games. They were the highest wild card seed. They went to the playoffs, and then they got beat. And then the very next season, instead of making that be the catalyst to start a string of winning seasons, the Bengals do that. The Bengals will lose 4 seasons in a row, and then they'll win 6 seasons in a row. And they'll be in the Super Bowl, they'll be in the playoffs, and they'll be one of the best teams. And then all of a sudden they'll win 4 games, and then they'll go on that little trek for 3 or 4 seasons. Everybody thought that 11-win season for the Browns was going to be the start of just a playoff run of putting together 4, 5, 6 seasons where you just go in the playoffs every year. You may not go to the AFC Championship game. You may not go to the Super Bowl, but you go to the playoffs. You know, the Browns are the only team that has not won the AFC North division. They've won it. They've won the division when it was other things like the AFC Central, but they have not, since they've realigned everything and put everything into north, south, you know, east and west. The Browns are the only team that has not won a single division crown in the AFC North. They came in second many times, including 2023. They had a chance, you know, at beating the Ravens. Of course, the Ravens are good, and we all know that.
I honestly, in memory, even before Baker Mayfield got there, when Derek Anderson was there, I really thought the year they went 10-6. There were a couple games that kind of slipped away from them when Jamal Lewis was having a second renaissance at running back. That they were gonna be hotter, and that was really disappointing because that was kind of a fun team to watch, especially with Braylon Edwards breaking into the league.
I was playing fantasy football at the time, and he was my Derek Anderson was my backup quarterback. I ended up trading him for like 3 players that made double-digit numbers every week because the guy couldn't get any points out of his quarterback, and Anderson was getting 34 points and 37 and 30 points, and so that was a good. But I think that's what happened with Bitonio. He just, you know, when you lose 14 games out of 17, you just kind of go, really? I mean, you know, all that work we put into it, and there was so much hubbub about the Browns going into last year on paper, how good they were going to be, and how the offense had turned the corner, and we got all these receivers of what they're going to do. You know, Chubb will be back eventually, and once Chubb comes back, then that'll be a good spark in the second half of the season, put us right back into the playoffs again. And none of that happened. The defense carried the team all year. Special teams carried the team all year. You know, the offense sucked. The offense was horrible. And they had no leadership with the offensive line coach. You know, we had Bill Callahan. Bill Callahan is the king of offensive line coaches. And then he just up and goes. Last year, the Browns were 24.
In his defense, he followed his son. His son got a head coaching opportunity in Tennessee, and you can't knock him for that.
Yeah, and in defense, he was still under contract with the Browns, and the Browns allowed that. I respect that. I would have done the same thing. But the Browns' offense last year was 24th in passing and 29th in running the ball, where the Browns have always run the ball. They allowed 66 sacks, 31st in the league or number 2 in the league in sacks allowed. You can't win games if your offensive line. Now, we had a bunch of injuries. The Bengals have always had lots of injuries with offensive line. The Browns had solved their offensive line. The Bengals just keep going through guys. You know, you got the kid, what was it, Andre Smith from Alabama. And it just, is he a good player? Is he not a good player? Should we trade him? Should we keep him? It's that type of player that you're just not sure, that never becomes this all-pro guy. I don't know what's going to happen. I do know we're in trouble with offensive tackle. We did not draft an offensive tackle. In all my writings and all my pre-draft thing, I kept saying, let's get a guy in the 3rd round and develop him. Let's put him on the bench for a year and then, you know, bring him out. You got 2 second-round picks. Take a guy. We got 2 third-round picks. Take a guy. We never did. We never did much as far as free agency until later. And then it was kind of picked over.
And I agree with you there. But I think it's going to be improved. Like you said, DeJuan Jones, you know, he gave an interview earlier this week talking that he doesn't have a problem playing left tackle. He's comfortable with right tackle as well. He looks healthy. He looks a little bit thinner, if you can say that, but a guy that weighs, you know, anywhere between 375 to 380 that comes under that, you know, we can say he looks a little bit thinner. So I'm a little bit confident in that. And that was a steal because that was a guy that gave up 0 sacks in his time in the Big Ten. Wasn't credited for any of them, and I thought he would. Man, in the 6th round, I just
4th round.
I thought he was a lot higher. 4th round, correction.
Yeah,
I thought he was a lot higher than that. But but defensively though, I know you had a couple linebackers out last year. You have Devin Bush may or may not be in legal trouble, so I was happy to see you guys draft a linebacker in the I believe in the 3rd round, 4th round, if I'm not mistaken.
The very first pick in the 2nd round.
Very first pick. That's right.
Very first pick in the 2nd round. Carson Schlesinger from UCLA. Got good speed. Got deep. Back in the 80s, like when the Giants were winning all the Super Bowls with, Harry Carson and Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks. Those guys were 6'4", 256. And the NFL's kind of got around that. They got around to the linebackers being 6 foot, 212 pounds, that can go coast to coast, play all 3 downs, got speed, that can hit, but they're not going to thump you. They're just not going to murder you when they finally get you to the ground. But Schlesinger 6'2", 210, has 4.54 speed. Listen to this. He had 90 solo tackles last year. 90 solo tackles, 136 total tackles, but 90 solo tackles. I played middle linebacker. If you get 7 or 8 tackles in a game, that's a good average on there. He averaged 9.5 tackles a game. It just amazes me on that. But the Browns had the very first pick in the 2nd round. Andrew Berry had lots of calls, and he could have traded it. I thought they were going to take Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri, with that pick. And what that pick represents, it's 1st-round talent for 2nd-round pay. So it's a very advantageous thing for teams to take somebody like that. They don't have to do that 4-year contract. They can sign them to a 3-year contract. They don't have to do the 5th-year option because they're a 2nd-round player. 136 total tackles. We got word that JOK is not going to play this year. In fact, he's already on a list.
Right.
When they put him on a list before June 1st, you're on IR for the rest of the year. So they got that news after the draft. I think Barry already kind of knew that JOK wasn't gonna take it. They pair him with Jordan Hicks, who's got 5 different years in the NFL that he had over 100 tackles. One year he had 151 tackles. And then Devin Bush, they're thinking, will be the other outside. If not, we got a young guy named Mohamed Diabate.
I saw that.
He's an undrafted free agent, but he's come around. And so that's probably going to be the linebacker group. This is what Jim Schwartz wants with his linebackers. And I've never seen a defensive coordinator do this. He doesn't blitz his linebackers. What he does is he wants his front 4 to be the entire pass rush. So he's only getting 4 guys in there. Once in a while, he'll send a linebacker. Once in a while, he'll send a safety. Once in a while, he'll send an outside cornerback. But basically, the front 4 is your pass rush. The linebackers cover the tight ends and the running backs and the fullbacks. Does anybody still have a fullback? What teams have a fullback?
You look at teams that utilize a fullback position would be a little bit of Kansas City, San Francisco, definitely.
The Ravens?
Baltimore every now and then they like to utilize that position,
right.
And
I
think a little bit of Chicago recently in my mind.
Yeah. The Browns have a fullback in camp this year. They haven't had a guy in a camp since 2020, so I don't know what's going on there. But that's the situation that they're dealing with there. They don't want their linebackers to blitz. They want them to find gaps, stop the running game, cover tight ends, cover running backs and any kind of back that comes out. And that's his scheme. That's his whole scheme. The cornerbacks, they're on an island. They're supposed to play man. He plays a lot of 4-2-5. And when he does that, one of the two linebackers sometimes is a safety. So he's got different attitudes about what linebackers do in a game, but it works. He was assistant coach of the year, in 2023. He's a proven defensive coordinator guru.
Oh, 100%. My fear was never in the defense this year. I know the linebacker pick was just kind of due to injury and probably, Devin Bush leaking out legal trouble right before the draft.
Yeah.
So I think they made a smart choice there. And, just like what's being said in our comments, imagine, your linebacker gets healthy and now you kind of have a 1-2 tandem, which is kind of the mold right now in the league is to have that 1-2 punch at linebacker. So I think Cleveland did a wise pick there. Like you said, we saw it with the first pick in the second round for us was T. Higgins a couple years ago. So definitely getting a lot of value there moving forward. So I think you guys are going to be solid. We know your defensive line. We know Myles Garrett's going to be Myles Garrett, regardless of what you think, whether it was the money or business or wanting to stay in Cleveland. Realistically, I don't know how you feel about that, or if you want to touch on that before we move on. But the Myles Garrett situation.
Yeah, I did a story about him. I thought that they could just get bank for him, and they could have got 2 first-round picks and a player. That could have helped us. He's on the wrong side of 30, but he's still an elite guy. He's still an all-world guy. He's still going to change the game. He's still going to be double teamed. He's still going to be the focus of what an offensive coordinator is planning that week. But it is what it is. And, I don't know if he did it as a ploy to get an extension to get bank, or if he truly wanted, I can see it. You become a player that plays all that time. Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. Fran Tarkenton never won a Super Bowl. Dick Butkus never won a Super Bowl. Tiki Barber never won a. There's lots and lots and lots of really great players that have come through the NFL that never won a championship. And I know that that's what you plan for. That's what you want, but you also get paid. And you also, your children's children are never going to have to work, and he can take any trip he wants. He can buy anything that he wants. I didn't think money was that big of a deal for him. I found his house in Wadsworth, Ohio. It's worth $1.75 million. That's like the utility shed to one of Aaron Rodgers' 4 houses. So I don't think money is an issue for him. But that's what ended up him being still with the Browns. I'm glad he's still with the Browns. We all are. And we'll just see. I was hoping that they would take Carter out of Penn State to be his mate on the other side. I don't have a problem with who they chose with Mason Graham, because we need a good pass rush up the middle. Oh, yeah. We need to be able to stop the run up the middle. The Bengals killed us up the middle every time we played them. Thrashed us.
We'll see. We'll see if we can replicate any of that forward in Cincinnati. But
that.
Give me your way too early prediction. If you had to look at the schedule right now, where do you guys think you finish, and who do you think finishes at quarterback 1?
QB1, I'm still going to follow my gut and saying that they brought in Joe Flacco to be the starter. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't know which guy is going to be the odd man out. I think what's going to happen is they're going to keep 4 guys on the final cut, and then the next day somebody is going to have a weird injury that puts him on temporary IR, and that leaves us with 3, because that happens every year. You got a guy you want to keep, then you can put him on IR the next, and they're only out for 4 weeks. Then that gives you 4 weeks to decide what's going to happen. So I think that's what that. As far as the schedule goes, I think 6 wins would be. I think that would be about what they're going to do this year. They've got I think the 13 hardest schedule of anybody in the league this year. We're in the AFC North and everybody's good. The Steelers went to the playoffs last year. The Bengals had an off year, but they've always, ever since Burrow's gotten there, they've always been good. I expect them to be back in the playoffs this year. The Ravens, I think the Ravens are one of the best teams in the NFL. I know that they choke on some games. The Browns had 3 wins last year, and two of them were against teams that went to the playoffs, the Steelers and the Ravens. So who can figure that? We know what the Ravens are about. I love Lamar Jackson. I would love to have Lamar Jackson as our quarterback, but I like a running quarterback. I grew up with quarterbacks that were runners. One of my favorite quarterbacks growing up was Fran Tarkenton. He ran all the time. So, but you look at the first half of the Browns schedule: Cincinnati, Baltimore, Green Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, Pittsburgh. All of those are good teams. They could start off the year 0-6 before they meet the Miami Dolphins and then the Patriots and the Jets. I just don't see that they're going to have a good season. Look at what the NFL has done. When they came out with the schedule, how many primetime games? 0? Well, what does the NFL know? And if you look at Vegas odds, Vegas is pretty much spot on. Their job is to make money, and they're not going to throw out numbers and then lose millions and millions and millions on information that is incorrect.
Right.
So the Browns are going to have a tough beginning. They could easily be 0-6 to start the season.
I'm a little more optimistic. I got you guys at 8-9. I think
Okay.
I think you guys are right there. I look at the offensive line. If it gets healthy, these guys knock some rust off. I think you're going to take a couple to the chin early on. But
Yep.
I have Joe Flacco being the starter, and then I have Shador Sanders being the starter around week 8 or 9, and breathes some new life into it.
Yeah.
Gets those guys kind of amped around, and just the young playmakers that you guys have on the outside, and even some of the pass catchers from last year. I think you guys are going to be exciting watch. I think even the games that you do lose, I think you're going to pull Bengals from last year. I think they're going to be entertaining. I think they're going to be a little more high scoring than people think. And you guys are going to become a oh man, let me catch this game at 1:00 or 4:00 when you're on the West Coast. So I'm going to give the Browns. It pains my heart. I'm going to give the Browns 8 wins this season. I think it becomes the turnaround, and you take those 2 first-round picks that you got next year, and you really build on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some very winnable games: Patriots, Dolphins, Jets, Raiders, 49ers, Titans. Depends on what the Chicago Bears are like. And we always seem to split with the Bengals. If we can split with the Steelers, lose 2 to the Ravens, I can see 8-9.
And I'm even going to kind of agree in the comments section here. James Frank is saying this is going to be the Steelers' first losing season under Mike Tomlin, and I couldn't agree more. I think the Aaron Rodgers situation, Will Howard being a rookie, a lot of veteran guys kind of departed. You look at their backfields, kind of a brand new face. I think it's for the worst, and some of those guys that they shipped off their best wide receiver to Dallas. I think that's going to be a little bit knock on the chin there on whoever finishes the year at quarterback. So I think the Steelers are in that 3rd and 4th column this season, fighting with you guys for the 3rd or 4th crown. So like I said, I think the AFC North is going to be like a different face this year. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I think the Browns are on the right step. Having a competitive quarterback camp is great. Having guys back from injury is great. 2 first-round picks going into next year. If nothing else works out, God forbid, you got to look at the quarterback market in the draft. But that's something that, Stefanski, God, I don't think he'll be there. But that's something that whoever leads the reins for the Browns next season, if the worst happens this year, you guys just have a lot of flexibility. Denzel Ward's always a trading chip that, you can move on if the worst happens. And I'm not saying he's going anywhere, Browns fans. I'm just saying that you have Pro Bowl caliber players that can definitely open the window when it comes to drafting and making some moves for some depth. So, I think it's going to be an exciting years for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Browns have 11 cornerbacks in camp. 11.
I can tell you as a Bengals fan, you can never have too many because we went through a slew of injuries in the secondary last year. So I think that's something that it's definitely going to be watched.
Yeah, and they released their second kicker yesterday, which kind of surprised me because our kicker had an off year. He had 68.9% on field goals, but then they signed a receiver named Jalen Gill, who grew up in Westerville, Ohio. So got a lot of receivers, a lot of cornerbacks. Andrew Berry was a college cornerback, so he's always put an emphasis on the corner, the defensive back room, whether it's safety or with cornerback. And like I said, you can't have enough cover corners. You just can't.
No, not in this league. The NFL stands for not for long. So that's going to be our prediction. I think we. Do you have any other thoughts before we move on from the Cleveland Browns tonight?
No, I think that pretty well covered it.
All right. Well, I'm also going to give you the mic. I know you had a few things that you wanted to touch on this evening, and
you said that your team is the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yes, I am a lifelong Bengals fan.
Okay.
I'm from Dayton, Ohio area, so
all right.
Back when it was just the TV channels, way before streaming. Those were the guys we got, minus any kind of blackouts before the blackout era ended for locally anyways. But I've always been a Bengals fan. And unfortunately it's just kind of, I live in Cincinnati now, so it's even a little bit deeper than it used to. So it's had some highs, but definitely a lot of pain being a Bengals fan.
Yeah. Who day? Do you know how the Bengals got their name?
I do not. I know we kind of spoke a little bit offline on you had some knowledge, and I did have knowledge that Paul Brown, but the Brown family founded both Cleveland and Cincinnati, so I had a little bit of knowledge of that going in. But take us through that.
Paul Brown did not. He was not the founder of the Browns. He was their first coach, and he ran the organization like he was the owner, but he didn't found it. There was a taxi cab driver. It was in another league. He called Paul Brown when Paul Brown was in the Navy and hired him. And then Paul Brown built the team and built the franchise. But he did found the Cincinnati Bengals, and how that went about was the American Football League was going to expand it to Miami and put the Dolphins in 1967. They wanted to expand to another city, and they called Paul Brown and said, hey, we've already worked out with the NFL that we're going to be one league starting in 1970, but we're going to put in another team in our league, a 10th team, and would you want to be a part of it? And Paul Brown was the majority owner. He had other owners in that, but he was given the choice of 5 different cities to put his new expansion team in. One was Seattle, one was Atlanta, one was Columbus, Ohio, one was Cincinnati, and the next one was Portland. And he was living in California. He really wanted to be back in Ohio, which is where he grew up in Massillon, where he won 6 state championships and won a national championship with Ohio State. And he basically brought it down to Columbus and Cincinnati. And the only reason that he chose Cincinnati over Columbus Well, Cincinnati had the Reds already. They had plans to build a stadium, which would end up being Riverfront. So the population was a little more, but we're only talking about 200,000 more versus the other town. They already were, he considered to be major league, so he chose Cincinnati. Now, how he got the name Bengals was in 1937. There was another Cincinnati Bengals team. Did you know that?
I did not, sir.
It was in another American Football League. There's been 5 leagues that have called themselves American Football League. The one that we know from 1960 to 69 that had all these 10 teams that merged in the NFL, like the Bills and the Chargers and the Chiefs, that was American League Football League number 5. Well, American Football League number 2 in 1937, they had 8 teams. They only played for 3 or 4 years. The team in Cincinnati was called the Cincinnati Bengals. Their colors were black and orange, like they should be. They only had 1 winning season. They went 6-2 in 1939, but their last 2 years, they only won 1 game in both the years. Well, when the that football league folded, the Cincinnati Bengals folded. Well, Paul Brown liked that name, and he decided to call his team the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, how did the 1937 team become the Cincinnati Bengals? That's a story on itself. The owner at the time was in his mother-in-law's kitchen, and the stove that she had was made by the Bengal Stove Company. And there was a big metal placard on it and logo with a leaping Bengal that says Bengal Stove Company. And that's how he came up with the name Bengals.
Wow. I did not know that. That's wild.
So is your Cincinnati Bengals team named after a stove? I'm not sure.
Well, we'll take it either way. The jungle, the Bengals. I've always loved it. But no, I didn't know that. Paul Brown really a very heavy history.
Yep.
Especially, I didn't even know. The league called him, and I know you said kind of offline that Philadelphia was kind of a close choice. Had not Columbus been in the back of his mind.
Yeah. Yeah, what happened with that was after he got fired from the Browns in 1962 and before he started the Bengals in 1968, the Philadelphia Eagles were for sale, and he was the first major bidder or had the major interest in buying the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 3 other people set up, but he would have been the majority owner. And in the end, he just decided not to do that. He was still under contract with the Browns. He was making $80,000. When the Browns fired him, he was on an 8-year contract. He was only 2 years in, and they had to pay him $80,000 a year for the next 6 years. And he decided that he just wanted to play golf and just, do nothing, and draw his contract. And then in 1967, the American Football League called in 1968 is when the Cincinnati Bengals became an official team. And that's Paul Brown's story right there. Now, Paul Brown is one of the few people that now I know what's the name of the stadium the Bengals are in now? They named it for a bank?
Paycor.
Okay. Well, before that, it was Paul Brown Stadium, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Paul Brown has another stadium named after him in Massillon, Ohio. Paul Brown Stadium. They've got a statue out front in front of Paycor. Don't they have a statue of Paul Brown?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So he's got 2 stadiums that were named after him. He's got 2 stadiums that have big statues. Now, I don't know why this is, and I haven't found anybody that gave me a reason. The Browns won 7 titles under Paul Brown. At one time, they went to 10 league championship games in a row. They went to 12 in 13 years from 1946 to the mid 50s. But yet there's no statue of Paul Brown outside of Cleveland Browns Stadium.
And I've always kind of thought negatively about that, and I think the storm that followed, the franchise moving to Baltimore, and a lot of those personnel that went with it.
Yeah,
it kind of takes away from it. I don't think Paul Brown will ever get it because of that, that drama that between what was the Baltimore Colts became the Baltimore Ravens when the Browns left town, as it's told kind of in the middle of the night, left town and popped up in Baltimore to become what we know as the modern day Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of those early teams should have been Cleveland Browns if you really think about it. But a what if scenario. But go ahead.
Well, for 30 days they were the Baltimore Browns.
See, that I didn't know either, because that's
they were the Baltimore Browns for 30 days, and then the citizens of Cleveland started raising a ruckus, and they ended up going to the state assembly, and what they did is they got the NFL to agree, and they asked Art Modell, the owner of Cleveland and Baltimore, if he would mind giving up everything that was Cleveland Brown, colors, history, records, everything. Because what happens when you're the Houston Oilers and you move to Nashville and become the Tennessee Titans, all that Houston Oilers stuff comes with your team. The same thing with the Cardinals. The Cardinals have been, I think, 7 or 8 different names. Well, when they go from Chicago to St. Louis to Phoenix to, all that tradition and records and all their alumni and former players and former coaches, all that stays, but not the Ravens. The Browns' history and colors and everything stayed with Cleveland for 3 years until they got an expansion team in 1999. That's never happened before in professional sports. It's always been the New Orleans Jazz became the Utah Jazz, the Minneapolis Lakers became the Los Angeles Lakers, and all of their tradition and history and colors and uniforms, everything follows them and becomes the historical history of their team. That didn't happen.
You look at Seattle when they moved to when they became OKC. So I'd say in recent memory they would be like the second team to follow that and kind of ignore their lore and just, okay, this is what we are now. And the fact that now we have a division, solely created by the 3 out of 4 teams solely created by those decisions, by whether it was the Brown family or now it was Art. 3 out of 4. That's you can't make that stuff up. So I do always think that the AFC North is such rich in history. Starting with Mike Brown, going with Art Modell, and just having those 3 teams always kind of have that chip on their shoulder when it comes to the historical factor of it, and even the rebirth of the Browns, in the 90s to now, and just how that really impacted the league. So it's the AFC North. I always call it the best division in football, and I'll always kind of stand behind that, because it just seems like year in and year out these teams kind of fight, pull a couple upsets, outside the AFC, and even in the Marvin Lewis area, we're sitting 3 teams in the playoffs year in and year out, whether that was Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, the Ravens, and even when we had 2 playoff appearances by the Browns, both by Maker and one that was started by Joe Flacco, even though that was carried by a pocket full of quarterbacks that were just winning games behind a really, really great offensive line and an unbelievable defense that year. But it kind of writes itself. I think the AFC North is just so rich in history, and I love that you brought it up, and I love the way you brought it up and just kind of explaining it and breaking it down. And we're Ohio Sports Talk on this program, and just like you said, he wanted to stay in the Ohio area because he had, Ohio. That's where he played high school sports. That's where he grew up. That's where he came back to after he came out of the Navy. And, I always loved that story because, this is where I came back to after the Marine Corps, especially. So it writes itself. It writes it a full circle. Maybe I'll maybe we'll write something on it together. We'll get together and write an article just about the history of it and really talk about it more. I would really love to, but
well, if it hadn't been for Clevelanders making such a fuss about the Browns leaving and their history and all that, the Ravens would be the Browns today. They were the Baltimore Browns.
And that's mind blowing in itself. And give Clevelanders their due. They've always been a big sports town. With the Cavs and with the with the Cleveland Browns and the heartbreak and the Indians. Don't even that's something we got to have a whole another episode on. I'd love to bring it back. I can't wait to bring it back. It'll be a lot smoother the second time around. I'm learning a little bit of the text, so I apologize for a rocky start. But Ohio in general. But yeah, Cleveland is just so through and through. Always been such a great sports town. I, as a Cincinnati fan, have always envied that because I've seen, when Cincinnati's high, I see jerseys everywhere. Everywhere, Barry. When Cincinnati's low, and I'm going to put it, we have a swear jar here on this show. I don't see any fucking jerseys at all, Barry. I see empty stadiums. I see people bitching and crying like they've never been a fan before in their fucking life. Right. I get on my program and I tweet and I take people to school about, this is the way the organization's been run for 30 plus years. It's not going to change to a degree. And people are always like, oh, no way. And I'm like, you got to know your history. And Barry, you're a guy that, clearly knows not only the Cleveland history, the Cincinnati history, but, you really know the league history. And I value that solely. So, I thank you for that. Going down memory lane and schooling me.
Next time I come on, I will explain to you how the Browns are why Cincinnati and the Steelers are all in the same division.
No, and we'll definitely we'll set that up sooner or later. I know you have a full schedule. Would you like to before we wrap everything up this evening? We're at 1,047 live viewers. Where can they find you, Barry? What is your next project? Where can they find you, and where can they see your past work?
It is dogsbynature.com, DAWGSBYNATURE.com. It's part of SB Nation. SB Nation is a huge site. So if you're an Indiana Pacers fan, there is an NBA segment folder and all the teams, and there's a Pacers site. If you're a Bengals fan, there is a site. If you're an Ohio State fan or any kind of major college, there is a site for you. Now, the college sites cover baseball, they cover basketball, they cover girls soccer, and they cover track, whereas the Bengals just cover the Bengals. We cover the Cleveland Browns under SB Nation. It's one of the largest sports internet sites in the nation. And dogsbynature.com. We've got 7 writers. They're all very talented. They've all got their own angle. I just wrote a story about Joel Bitonio wanting to retire and why he didn't retire. I also just interviewed the CEO of Cadex Cleats, who have invented a cleat that's going to change how everybody wears cleats. That's going to come out probably next week. Last year, I did a thing on Guardian caps. I don't think you know this or not, but within 5 years, all players at all levels are going to have a Guardian cap on their head. All of them. Because if you take out 55% of concussions, because you can wear this thing, yes, it looks like a bobblehead.
Yes.
The leagues and, little high schools and colleges, they can't just look the other way and say, oh, I don't like it. It's ugly. It's nothing. Well, at one time, players didn't wear helmets and then they put on leather helmets. At one time, there were no plastic helmets until 1952. That became a new thing. At one time, players didn't wear shoulder pads. That became a thing. At one time, the NFL played with a white football for night games. So things do change. And in 5 years, every football team at every level, the Canadian League, Australian Rules football, everything will be wearing Guardian caps. I did a huge story. I interviewed their CEO. So we expand and we cover a lot of football other than just the Browns. Dogsbynature.com. Coach, I've really enjoyed my time. Let me give you an idiom before I go.
Go ahead. The mic is yours.
I've got a complete database. I've been collecting these for about 20 years. An idiom is something that describes something that may or may not sound like it's logical. Like when you give somebody the cold shoulder, well, that came from feeding somebody the shoulder part of an animal and serving it cold because you didn't want him to spend the night, or you didn't want him to spend too many days at your house. So a football idiom is something that really has nothing to do with the game itself, but it's part of the game. Like sack. How is a sack part of a football game? But we know what it is. I'm going to tell you where red zone comes from. Now, we know the red zone is from the 20-yard line to the goal line of the defensive team. This was coined by Hall of Fame coach Joe Gibbs in 1982. He was, after a game, he was doing an interview with the Washington Post, and he kept explaining different schemes and plays that happened. And 3 times he said, and when we got into the red zone, and then when we did this after we got out of the red zone, and finally the writer said, "What, coach, what are you talking about, red zone? What are you talking about?" Coach Gibbs defined himself from the 20 to the goal line as the red zone. That got put in an article, and from there it spread. After a while, everybody was calling it the red zone, until now it's just part of the game.
Wow. That's awesome, man. Even as a coach and a longtime player and even longer time fan, nobody sat down and told me that. You look at, it's such a coined term right now. You look at, NFL red zone, and, they're in the red zone. We're in the red zone. I never knew where it came from. So that's big time. That's big time for our fans, big time for me. And definitely going to teach that to my young kids as we enter camp ourselves coming up on Monday over at Wittenberg. So I'm gonna take that pocket. It's not 2 days. It's not 2 days. It's more of a 7-on-7 camp. There's no contact until August. No contact. Yeah. I promise. If the OHSAA is listening, we are following the rules. But no, I can't wait to hit, honestly. But that's just the Marine in me. But yeah, that's awesome, brother. And we appreciate you having you on. I'll definitely post your link over on Ohio Sports Talk. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Right. We're on Instagram, TikTok. Listen to this interview is going to be on Apple. This is going to be on Spotify. It's going to be on our X page. I'm going to get it out there. Definitely we're going to give you a copy both with the video and both with the audio. So you can put it where you want to, Barry. You guys can always retweet us too, and we're gonna make it happen. I can't wait to have you back on the program. I've learned so much tonight. It's definitely been a transition. Ohio Sports Talk is going through a little bit of a shift, but I will continue what we built to build a better program. Continuing bringing on great guests like Barry, and we're going to add on. And I'm not going to disappoint you, fans. Bear with me; it's going to be a little bit of a transition, but. Running it solo is a little bit different. Thank you for your time, Barry. Do you have anything else for our fans before we wrap it up tonight?
No, I think I can catch the second half of the Thunder Pacers game. My brother lives in Indianapolis, so he keeps texting me.
Well, I'm a big UD fan, so we're pulling for Obi Toppin. So
yeah, gotcha. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and thanks for having me on, Coach.
Thank you, Barry. This has been Jordan with Ohio Sports Talk. This has been Barry. Being a guest of Ohio Sports Talk, staff writer with
Dogs by Nature.
Dogs by Nature.
You're supposed to write it. You were supposed to write that on your hand.
I know it. The ink I start sweating. The ink starts running.
Yeah, I got
it's like trying to cheat in high school, and it never quite works out. But y'all have a great night. Thank you, sir. This has been Ohio Sports Talk.